A UFO followed a 747 for 45 minutes. Then military radar saw. ETA Boeing 747 is flying through the darkness over Alaska when something enormous appears. Beside the cockpit, not a distant light, not a blip on a radar screen, something close enough for the pilot to see, close enough that he claimed he could feel its heat. Turns, it follows. He descends, it follows. Again. Then he makes a complete 360-degree turn, and whatever is beside his aircraft follows, him all the way around. For the next 45 minutes, 3 experienced airline crew members watch the object pace their 747 through the frozen Alaskan night. And then military radar detects something too. So what exactly was flying beside Flight 1628? Welcome back to Mystery Stories 365. Tonight, we're going deep into one of the strangest and most controversial UFO encounters ever reported by professional airline pilots. An encounter involving a veteran captain, 3 crew members, FAA investigators, conflicting radar data, and a massive object that nobody was able to definitively identify. And stay with us until the end, because the explanation may be even stranger than the encounter itself. November 17, 1986, it is already dark over Alaska. Japan Airlines Boeing 747 cargo freighter is cruising at approximately 35,000 feet above the frozen wilderness. The aircraft is Flight 1628, carrying a cargo of French wine on a long journey from Paris toward Tokyo, with scheduled stops in Reykjavik and Anchorage. At the controls is Captain Kenju Terauchi. Terauchi is not an inexperienced pilot. He has been flying for nearly 3 decades and has approximately 10,000 hours in the air. Beside him are First Officer Takanori Tamafuji and Flight Engineer Yoshio Tsukuba, 3 trained aviation professionals. 3 sets of eyes, and none of them are expecting anything unusual until around 5:11 in the evening. Terauchi notices 2 lights ahead of the aircraft. At first, they don't look particularly strange. They could be military aircraft, they could be distant traffic, they could be almost anything. And pilots see unusual lights in the sky all the time, so Terauchi watches them. He waits for them to disappear. They don't. Instead, the lights begin moving closer, and they appear to be pacing the 747. Terauchi watches carefully. The objects aren't simply moving across his field of vision. They're staying with him, matching the aircraft, keeping pace, and then they get closer, much closer. Something comes alongside. Terauchi later described the objects as having rectangular arrays of glowing lights that appeared almost like illuminated thrusters. He also claimed that the objects were close enough for him to feel heat through the cockpit glass. But then something even more extraordinary happens. A third shape appears. Suddenly, this isn't just a pair of mysterious lights. There is now a massive object beside the aircraft. Terauchi described its shape as resembling a walnut. Its silhouette was large enough to blot out stars behind it. There were no obvious wings, no visible tail, no conventional exhaust trail, just a massive, strange shape traveling silently through the darkness. And according to Terauchi's estimate, the object came within roughly 500 feet of the 47 at its closest point. Imagine that. You're sitting inside one of the largest passenger aircraft ever built. You're traveling at 35,000 feet outside. Your cockpit window is an object you cannot identify, and it is close enough to dominate your entire view. For a veteran pilot, this wasn't just strange, it was terrifying. Terauchi calls Anchorage. Terauchi contacts Anchorage Air Route Traffic Control Center. His voice remains professional, but underneath that calm voice is a man trying to understand something that should not be. Their controllers ask him to confirm the object's position. Terauchi reports what he is seeing. Then he asks for permission to change course. He is cleared to turn approximately 45 degrees away from his original route. The object follows. He descends from 35,000 feet to approximately 31,000 feet. The object follows. Then, the crew attempts something even more dramatic. A full 360-degree turn. The idea is simple. If the object is another aircraft, perhaps the maneuver will separate them, but it doesn't. The object remains with them. It continues, matching the 747's movements. Turn after turn, change after change, it simply stays there, and suddenly, the question isn't just, what is that? The question becomes, why is it following us? The radar mystery. This is where the story becomes much more complicated, because the encounter wasn't only reported from inside the cockpit. Radar enters the story. Anchorage's own radar did not clearly show an unusual target, but military radar at Elmendorf Air Force Base reportedly detected what was described as a surge, primary return near Flight 1628. Another radar system at Fairbanks did not register the same thing. 3 radar systems, different results, and that contradiction would become one of the most important parts of the entire case. To those who believed the object was physically present, the military radar return appeared to provide independent evidence, but skeptics offered another possibility. They argued that the radar return could have been a false or split return associated with the aircraft itself. In other words, the radar might not have detected another object at all. It might have detected something created by the 747's own radar signature, and that leaves us with a strange problem. The pilots saw something. One radar system appeared to detect something. Other radar systems didn't. So what was actually happening? They tried to see it. Controllers attempted to get other aircraft into the area. Nearby aircraft were asked to look. Later, a military aircraft was also involved in the search, but the crews did not report seeing the mysterious object. They saw Flight 1628, but they did not clearly see another aircraft beside it. And that creates one of the biggest unanswered questions in the case. If something enormous was really flying beside a Boeing 747 for nearly an hour, why didn't everyone see it? Was the object visible only from a particular angle? Was it much farther away than Terauchi believed? Was there some kind of atmospheric or perceptual phenomenon? Or was something genuinely there that simply wasn't visible to the other crews? There is no universally accepted answer. 45 minutes. The encounter continues for much of an hour. For roughly 45 minutes, the crew experiences something they cannot explain. Massive object appears to maintain position near their aircraft. It doesn't behave like normal air traffic. It doesn't simply pass by. It doesn't fall behind. It doesn't disappear when the 747 changes course. It stays. And then, according to Terauchi's later descriptions, the object suddenly moves away with extraordinary speed. A movement he believed was far beyond the capabilities of conventional aircraft of the era. But once again, there is an important distinction. That is what the pilot reported. It is not proof that the object actually possessed impossible technology. The testimony tells us what he experienced. It does not, by itself, tell us what the object was. And that distinction becomes extremely important when the investigation begins. Flight finally lands at approximately 6:20 that evening. Flight 1628 lands safely in Anchorage. No crash, no injuries, no damage. The aircraft is intact. The crew is safe. But 3 experienced aviation professionals have just reported one of the strangest encounters of their careers, and now investigators have to figure out what happened. This isn't a story from an isolated cabin in the wilderness. This isn't a blurry photograph taken by an anonymous witness. There is an aircraft. There are 3 professional crew members. There are air traffic control records. There is radar data. And there is an FAA investigation. The FAA takes the case seriously. John Callahan, who was the division chief of the FAA's Accidents and Investigations branch at the time, later became one of the most controversial figures connected to the case. Years afterward, Callahan claimed that officials from agencies including the CIA and representatives connected to the Reagan administration were present. During a briefing about the incident, he also claimed that records and materials connected to the case were collected afterward, and that officials wanted the meeting kept secret. Those claims remain disputed. They should not be treated as proven fact. But Callahan's role in the FAA investigation itself is part of the historical record, and there is another important detail. The FAA's official report did not simply dismiss the entire incident as nonsense. The report acknowledged the basic sequence of events described by the crew and addressed the radar information, but it did not identify the mysterious object. The case remained unexplained, and that is what makes Flight 1628 so Interesting. Not because the government officially declared yes, it was an alien spacecraft. It didn't. The interesting part is that the investigation did not produce a definitive identification. The skeptical explanation, but there was another side to the story. Skeptical researcher Philip Klass examined the case and argued that the crew may have misidentified ordinary astronomical objects. Specifically, Jupiter and Mars were positioned in the general area where Terauchi reported seeing the strange lights. From this perspective, the story becomes much less mysterious. Perhaps the pilots were seeing planets. Perhaps their apparent movement was influenced by the movement of the aircraft. Perhaps distance and darkness distorted their perception of size and position. And perhaps the radar anomaly had an ordinary technical explanation. There was another detail that skeptics considered important. Terauchi had previously reported other unusual sightings. The FAA's internal documentation reportedly referred to him as a UFO repeater. To skeptics, that suggested that his interpretation of unusual lights might have been influenced by his previous experiences. But to believers, it doesn't prove anything. A pilot reporting unusual objects more than once doesn't automatically mean every sighting was imaginary. Terauchi never accepted the planetary explanation, and neither did John Callahan, who remained convinced that something genuinely unexplained had been present. So what did he actually see? This is where we have to separate what we know from what we believe. We know that Flight 1628 was real. We know that 3 crew members reported an unusual encounter. We know that the FAA investigated it. We know there was disagreement over the radar data. We know skeptical researchers proposed conventional explanations. And we know the object was never definitively identified, but beyond that, the mystery begins. Was it a secret military aircraft? Was it an unusual atmospheric phenomenon? Were ordinary astronomical objects misinterpreted from the cockpit? Was the radar return simply an artifact? Or was there something else in the sky that night? Something that we still don't have an adequate explanation for? The pilot pays a price, Captain. Terauchi also paid a professional price for speaking publicly about the incident. After giving an unauthorized interview to Kyoto News, he was grounded by Japan Airlines and moved to a desk position. Later, he returned to flying. He eventually retired, but he never withdrew the central claim of his story. He maintained that something unusual had been flying alongside his aircraft. That night, he didn't turn the incident into a career of chasing UFOs. He simply continued to insist that he knew what he had seen. And that makes the case difficult to dismiss completely. Not because his testimony proves an extraterrestrial explanation, it doesn't, but because the event was witnessed by multiple trained professionals and investigated by aviation authorities. The final question, so, what came within a few hundred feet of a Japan Airlines 747 over Alaska on November 17, 1986? Was it a secret aircraft? A misidentified planet? A radar anomaly? An unusual atmospheric phenomenon? Or something that genuinely remains unexplained? Nearly 4 decades later, we still don't have a definitive answer, and perhaps that's what makes Flight 1628 so fascinating. Most mysteries eventually collapse under investigation. Strange light becomes an aircraft. A strange sound becomes weather. Strange radar signal becomes a technical malfunction, but this case left behind something much harder to resolve. 3 professional witnesses. Conflicting radar evidence and official investigation. Multiple competing explanations. And no final identification. Captain Kenju Terauchi died in 2019. He never took back the core of his account. And the Alaskan sky remains exactly what it was that night. Dark, silent, and full of possibilities. Some encounters end with an explanation. This one never did. If you enjoyed this mystery and want to explore more unexplained encounters, strange historical events, and stories that still have no clear answer, make sure you subscribe to Mystery Stories 365 and turn on notifications, because there are still mysteries out there that nobody has solved. I'll see you in the next one.